Hey guys, BJ the Brave here, back with some more Warpforge content, and today I am going to go through my Chaos Black Legion full card tier list. So, for those of you who aren't familiar, I tend to rate cards on a kind of 1 to 5 star rating. A 1 is the card's pretty unplayable, it's a very bad card. 2 is that it's you might see it in occasional builds, but overall it's a pretty bad card for a decent reason. 3 is that it's a card that it can be like situationally good, right? In the right deck or in the right situation, it can be okay. But there are many situations where it's a bit meh, not that great as well. 4 is that it's a very good card. These are where the majority of our um, decks are kind of made up from, if you like, the kind of star cards, and the 5-star cards are those kind of absolute must-have, top, meta-defining S tier cards. So that is the system that I rank them on. Obviously, this is my opinion, guys. So obviously, let me know if there are any you disagree with. For the Chaos one, I did actually check in with a few players, including Buggy, who's like one of the better Chaos players. And yeah, this is the list that I came up with. Hit that like button if you enjoy this sort of content. Let me know in comments if you want to see me do something like this for the other factions. And yeah, let's jump in. Alright, so first of all, on the unplayable cards, we have got the Meltagun Legionary and the Accursed Hellbrew. These are quite new cards that came out recently on the new release, and for me, I actually just find them to be massively disappointing. They just don't offer enough value, or in the case of the Accursed, it comes down too late. And it's similar with Galaran's Disciple. I mean, I've kind of convinced myself that this card's like really good at times, but then in practice, it's just not that great. It can be used like a bit of a deterrent. It can help Chaos with flyers, for example. Our drones, you can put this down, and it can help with your Warlord to trade against drones. If they kill it, then it makes the drones vulnerable, which means that you can do something as well. So in that particular matchup, like I do think it can help you fight for the early game a little bit, and I was kind of in a couple of minds as to whether I think this is bad or unplayable. But overall, just think that most Chaos decks, this isn't really doing a lot for your game plan. Possession's another one of those massive costing cards. It's an 8 cost stratagem. Yeah, so what? It doubles the melee attack and health on a permanent basis, but it's kind of like, you know, it can be used as a very expensive finisher. There's cheaper ways to achieve that. The Unholy Smite is a 6 costing card that basically has a kind of random effect in what it hits. And yes, you can make the card cost less. There's a good chance you can get it for less. But again, with the random nature of it, just really don't want to be using kind of like potentially high remove card, for example, that just isn't going to hit the thing that you want it to hit. Delightful Agonies, I think, is a bit of a meme. It's a real shame about this card because it's like a heal card, and I'd really love to see this card reworked, because why can't Chaos have a heal card like all the other factions do that makes sense? You know, if you put this on your Warlord, it doesn't make sense because Warlord can't have dark packs. So unless you were going to kind of somehow, I did wonder about when you heal Abaddon, whether it count as like a dark pack, almost like a little running total. Anyway, it's not a good card. Obliterator, it's actually not too bad, the stats on the Obliterator. It's just that when you look at Chaos, who are essentially, they've got the kind of best statted cards in the game, when you look at the other 7 drops, the Obliterator just doesn't come close. It also does nothing on the turn that it arrives. It doesn't have Vanguard. Overall, it's just not a card you can really play in a good deck. And I used to think that Child of Torment had some potential, but actually I just really don't, because the Child of Torments is like when a unit basically when a unit basically receives damage, it gains +1 range attack. So you've got to play this card, then you've got to kind of take the damage, and then you attack. It's just never going to really happen. The card's going to die before then. It doesn't have great stats for energy 6. The Sorcerer's an interesting one, but again, I also think it ultimately ends up being unplayable, because for 5 energy it only has 5 health and 4 melee attack that your opponent can kind of go up against a trade, which for 5 energy is like definitely slightly underwhelming and understated, to be honest. So the fact that it has a talent is irrelevant because you're just never ever going to get to play the talent. The Havoc is like a common card, so it's one of your starter cards, and it just has terrible stats for 5 energy. And the Demon Blade Legionary is a weird card because even though it has good health, having the 5 health for 4 energy, unfortunately it only has 2 range attacks. So it's really easy, even for smaller units, to kind of like trade against this and get rid of it. And so it has this strike ability, which is heal 2. It's really hard to get a strike ability off with an early game card. And the disappointing thing about this card is even if you do, it's actually nothing to write home about. It's not actually a very good ability, so it's unplayable. The Corn Berserker, a similar thing, right? It's like it's got this 4 health 3, which looks good, but when it's only got 1 range attack, it's a grounded unit, it's just too easy to kind of play around, and it's going to end up basically losing your tempo because it's just too easy to beat. And the Dark Disciple's just also a bit of a waste of time for 1 energy. The only way you could make an argument for this being played is if you were playing like a super fast aggro Harken deck, where, for example, on 3 you could drop a Dark Disciple, still spend 2 energy on Harken's Warlord ability, Harken attacks, and then that pact on the Dark Disciple. So I can kind of loosely understand that, but you know, other than on energy 3, that's just not that good a combo, and you'd probably rather just put it on something decent. So ultimately, in any sort of decent deck, it's an unplayable card. You're not going to see it. Alright, so moving on to the bad cards. Again, the Spreading Corruption is one of the newer cards. Looks really interesting in theory, this idea that you can give vulnerable 4 to a unit, and then if you kill that unit, the vulnerability jumps. One of the things I kind of like about it is it's got a sort of weird potential to help you deal with stealth units, but in practice it's just way too fiddly to kind of get kind of like consistent value out of this. Execution is also Execution's an interesting one because this is a card that I kind of wanted to rate a little bit higher. Execution might be the first bad card that you still see played in units, because in certain decks, because it is kind of still the best hard removable card that Chaos have got. But the reason why I'm saying it's a bad card is that compared to the removal cards in other factions, it really is bad, right? Like, and the fact that you have to damage something before you can execute it is just, it's not a very particularly good payoff, and it makes this card kind of rely on a combo rather than just being able to remove it like all the other hard removals can. Demonic Pact is just a terrible legendary because it basically makes you invulnerable only in your turn but not in theirs. And the idea of this card is it's kind of like, in theory it's not as bad. This is why I've not put this as unplayable, because in theory you could have a board, your opponent could have a couple of units on the board and play a Demonic Pact, and that helps you basically take over the tempo, right? Because you get to hit him and he's not hitting you back. So in theory there is a role for this to play, but in reality you're going to find that this just sits in your hand for a lot of turns. Trying to find a turn where playing this for 4 energy makes sense. It has to be saving units that are probably worth that, and it just you'd just 9 times out of 10 rather have a really good 4 energy drop like a Chosen or something rather than having this. The Gift of Chaos is also, I think, a bad card because it's giving 2 Dark Packs to a friendly troop. But when you think about Abaddon's Chosen, that's 1 energy, and that allows you to give a Dark Pact of your choice. Whereas for 3 energy, you're only getting 2 Dark Packs from the Gift of Chaos, and they end up being random. So it just doesn't hold value in comparison to how other ways in which you can get the Dark Packs. Hideous Mutation is just a bit of a waste of a card because even though giving armor to a unit is good, it's only 1 armor, and it's like we've just spent a whole card to just give 1 armor to something. Not very efficient. Maybe you could use this in certain builds where you have a ton of card draw. Maybe it could make sense there. Potentially in like a Galaron deck that still runs Hosts of Chaos, so it's got its Warlord power and Hosts of Chaos to draw. And so it's kind of like a cheap way of clearing your hand. But in most other decks, like most powerful Abaddons, you just don't have that luxury to be spending 1 drop, a card placement essentially on this. And now Iskander is a weird card because it keeps getting fiddled with and buffed and changed and tweaked. It's now coming out with a shield, so I'm not going to put it in unplayable, but it's still a massive fat kind of unit for 9 energy. It doesn't do much on the turn it arrives. Really the main value of Iskander is coming out through Black Crusade and coming out automatically through that. Chaos Lords is kind of similar. It's like, in theory, the Chaos Lord sounds quite powerful, right? It's like, whenever you deploy a troop, give it a random Dark Pact. It's like, yeah, but if this doesn't come out of your Black Crusade, you've got to drop a massive 8 drop, spend 8 energy on something that does nothing on the turn it comes down. Then you're going to have to wait for the next turn when you've actually got energy to play other units, and then they start to get the Dark Pact and hope that the Lord survived. And honestly, it's just not how you want to be spending 8 energy, to be honest. It's got potential, obviously, to be very powerful in certain situations, certain matches, but in most games it'll just be a big fat card that is sat in your hand that you never get to play. Chaos Chosen is, I'm putting as a bad card, because even though the stats are okay on this, it's kind of like 6s all round, can't be cheated, just does nothing when you play it. Then it has this strike ability that says gain a random Dark Pact. Well, you might get strike off once with this, maybe, but then what you get is random anyway. It's just not, it's not an unplayable card, and if you are new to Chaos, it is definitely a card you could try in some early builds, but ultimately when you've unlocked the collection, it really is a bad card compared to what you've got access to. The Master of Possession is an interesting one, because this is one of the cards that I could kind of see getting promoted one day. It's actually got okay stats. 6 health for 5 energy is good, and 5 melee is good as well. Obviously the 3 is how you trick the trade, but it's not terrible. You know, if it was 2, that would be terrible, but 3 is not that bad. And it actually has an okay Rite of Possession, although the talent Rite of Possession is a little bit expensive, but it's pretty good. It's a kind of ability to kind of remove unit 2 to 4 damage, but if you kill the unit, then it basically deploys a possessed marine, which is pretty powerful if you can get that off. But a lot of things have got to happen, right? You've got to play this. It does nothing. It's got to survive the next turn. Then you've got to spend energy on that as well. Overall, I think it's a bad card because I think it's just too slow and it never gets to do what you want it to do. But you know, there could potentially be a future meta where this card goes up to a 3-star card. Now, the Hound of Abaddon is also a bad card because for 2 energy, yes, it has the 3 health, and yes, it has Vanguard, but only 1 melee attack. It's just too easy to sort of kind of play around. Again, you could argue it's towards the bottom of situational, this card. You know, are there sort of like certain key deck builds where this could have a utility? Yeah, potentially. But overall, I just think it's not a card that you really want to put in your deck. And the same with the Chaos Sergeant. I mean, when I first started playing Chaos, people told me it was a really good card because it is a rally. Gain a Dark Pact, which means you can choose what to give it. Do you want more health? Do you want more? The problem is that with only 2 health to start with, I feel like you have to give it health, and because otherwise it's just going to die to the enemy warlord, right? And if you're giving it health, that means that it basically is just a 2-1, so it's just not impactful. It's just not going to trade and stand up to anything. It's a bit pointless. Now, the Black Legionary is interesting because obviously only having 2 health means that you're going to drop this and your enemy warlord's going to remove it. Now, where that might be good is in a super hardcore fast aggro deck, because yeah, I drop it, and yeah, you're going to remove it with your warlord, but excuse me, but if your warlord's then taking 3 damage, which it would because this is a 3/3, right, then you're kind of happy with that because you're kind of looking at it almost like for 2 energy I did 3 damage to face, and in a super fast aggro deck that's all good. But outside of that concept, it's a pretty useless card, and we don't really have a Chaos deck that is that sort of uber fast aggro. So right now it's a bad card. Potentially it could sit in some sort of future aggro deck. And Sylar is the first warlord that we're looking at, and it's also a bad card because some of its abilities aren't bad. Some of the abilities that Sylar can generate, it generates 4 psychic powers. Some of them are actually quite powerful, but it's random, so the timing of when you get them, they can actually just end up being useless, and that's the problem. Siler. Okay, so when it comes to the situational cards, they're sort of, you know, they're sort of okay. You know, they can be a bit meh, but they can be good in certain situations. I think I put Galaron the Pios here. I like Galaron. I just think for 2 energy, his ability is, it's not overwhelming. I mean, it's nice that you can kind of like draw cards, which is pretty cool. But he doesn't really. The Chaos are very leaning into the Dark Pact mechanic, and Galaron doesn't really enable that, and that's the biggest problem that Galaron has. So it's definitely not a bad warlord. I just don't think it's good enough to be called good, and it only has 35 health as well. So that doesn't really lend itself to kind of playing a particularly sort of control deck, which its ability might lend you to think it does. You don't trust Despoilers for 4 energy. This is a very strange card because, you know, on the release, this was a card that me and many people thought might end up being like an S tier card. It seemed to be incredibly powerful to be able to basically give vulnerable 1 to all future cards that your opponent will play. But it ends up just being a little bit too slow. There might only be 3 or 4 more turns, and having vulnerable 1 of them, it's just not impactful enough. And then we're having to take a whole turn off, spend 4 energy on this. It's yeah, it's actually been a bit underwhelming. Okay, so next up we've got the Disgustingly Resilient. Again, bit of a meme card this, you know. Obviously there is a strategy, which is to just try and build a mega unkillable unit and hope they don't have hard removal, and that's what this card's there to help you do. And if you like the idea of that, then we'd get some really good value out of this, and that's why I'm saying it's situationally good. It's not my style of play, and it's not consistent, and that's why I can't really say it's anything better than situational. Legacy of Vengeance is a really good card, but again, it's often a card you want to use to combo, to kind of, your opponent goes wide, to kind of give your warlord this turn warlord to this really big unit, and often you use it to kind of finish the game. So it's very good in that situation, but you might be holding it all game to kind of use it in that situation. Abaddon's Chosen's pretty good. It's a 1-drop, and it gives you a Dark Pact of your choice. So way better than the Delightful Agonies that we gave Unplayable. We made that a 1. I think Abaddon's Chosen's okay. Definitely are some decks that you can get away with sticking these in. The problem is that you often just want to get these from other means like the Host of Chaos and stuff, so you often don't want them in the deck, clogging it up. The Vex Machinator is a card that I personally like. As a 10-drop, I think coming down and dealing 5 damage to an enemy is good because it kind of gives an immediate impact on the board. You know, combined with your Warlord attacking, that's potentially 7 damage, so you can kill a lot of units with that. Obviously, if it's a vehicle, then it's insanely good. Imagine playing this after your opponent just played Long Strike, kills the vehicle outright, or your opponent played the Monolith, something like that. So if vehicles really do become a part of the meta at the kind of top end of the game, Vex Machinator is there as a nice tech card. Now the Terminator Champion is also pretty good. I've seen a lot of people poo-poo the Terminator Champion, mainly because they compare it to things like the Hellbrute, but actually for 7 energy, these are good stats. Like for 7 energy, a 7/7, 8 health, and 1 armor. That's a very strong body. It's brilliant in draft. The biggest problem with this card that stops it from being like a good card is not only that there are better other cards in the faction, but also just that it doesn't really do anything on the turn you drop it. You drop it, and there's no impact to the game. Your opponent can ignore it, etc., etc. Similar thing with Maulerfield, no impact on the turn that you actually drop it, but this is one hell of a big beefy unit, and obviously if you do get to start swinging with it and getting that strike ability off, then it can be very good in that situation. Terminator, Chaos Terminator is currently very underwhelming, not particularly well started, but it is a big vanguard, so like, I say situational, I'm tempted to say it's bad, but it is situational because you can play it in things like the Black Crusade decks, where that means the Terminator could just come on, and not for free, but as part of the 4 units that the Black Crusade deploys, and that gives you a vanguard stopping your opponent in the track. So there are those types of situations where this can be strong. Aspiring Champion is situational too, just because this card, it's a weird card because you kind of don't want to play this on turn 4 like you do with Chosen or whatever, because you really want to play this when you can play a Dark Pact with it as well. And if you were running things like Abaddon's Chosen in the deck, maybe that's a good deck to run Inspiring Champion. Just find that most Chaos builds, there are other 4-drops that you can play have more effect on turn 4, and they just are overall a bit better than the Inspiring Champion. This is a card that can, sometimes running a 1 of this could be good, because this card can spiral and win you games if it's later in the game. The Rubik Marine. What shall I say about the Rubik? This is like one of the biggest memes in the faction for sure. There is this idea that you can kind of play this, just kind of go off withdrawing, and it just gets bigger and bigger. I don't subscribe to it. I think it's a really inconsistent strategy. I think obviously in certain situations this card will just win you the game. I've lost games to this card, but it's quite rare, and often what happens is the Chaos player puts all their eggs in one basket and your opponent just removes it, and then it's like, okay, lost the game. Chaos spawns in here for me. I actually quite like the Chaos spawn. I just struggle to get it into many decks. Like, what do I drop to put it in? But I actually think that for 1 energy, it's essentially like a 2 damage fireball, because you can play this from hand and do 2 damage. That could be 4 damage with your Warlord, 5 with Galeron, for example. Ability. Yeah. Well, it is a really, really good card. It's just that it's for 1 energy. There are many other flankers, and so you just usually wouldn't include this in the kind of top tier deck. I guess Legionary is a weird one. Some people really swear by it. A lot of people might have this as a kind of 4 out of 5, like a good card. Me personally, I've actually dropped it out of most of my Chaos decks. I actually don't run it. I prefer to just, like, for example, heal with Abaddon on E2, and then once you're into E3, I find other cards to be better, to be honest. And Harken Worldclaim is not a bad Warlord. It's gone through some buffs recently, so it's definitely got much better. It could arguably be good, except for the main problem with Harken is that he's got to physically attack for his ability to kind of go off, and with only having 35 health, that can be quite detrimental often, and he can end up kind of losing the game. But it is a pretty powerful ability to have Blast 2 and put a Dark Pact on, like Abaddon puts a Dark Pact on. I do like his ability, but as I say, 35 health with a Lord that has to attack every turn can be quite hampering. Okay, so next on to the good cards. I think Malicious Volley is a really solid card. It's one of the new cards. It can do damage and stun a unit. That's really powerful. You can also use it on your enemy Warlord as burn to finish the game. Murderous Desires is a really great combo finisher. Many of the top Chaos decks right now are running this, along with things like Vengeance, Sword of Draconum. Why? Because the AI sort of knows to play the most optimal play. So for example, your Warlord would do lethal if it was to attack again, and you play Murderous Desires, your Warlord will attack your enemy's Warlord. So it kind of always will make the optimal play, and that makes it a really, really good card. Skeins of Fate is really good too, like, basically for 3 energy. You're looking at kind of like giving stealth to a unit and drawing a card, which is often pretty powerful. The fact that in Chaos it's not unreasonable to assume you can get several Dark Pacts on a unit, 2 or 3 quite easily, and this is drawing a card for each Dark Pact on it, so it can be a real draw machine. Master of Executioners is a good card. I just struggle to fit this in a lot of the time. I think it goes in a slightly more aggressive, low curve deck. Maybe you could play this over like a Chosen or something, just because having that strike ability and it almost I'm thinking of the word overwhelm from Rune Terror. It's like do damage to your enemy Warlord even though you're attacking it. That's a really powerful ability. Speaking of really powerful abilities, the Black Crusade is one of the most fun stratagems in the faction. Decks are built around this. The 10 energy, deploy 4 random troops from your deck. So obviously you can build your deck around this. You can make sure you've got plenty of like expensive units, and then your Black Crusade on 10. Maybe you can get Black Crusade a bit cheaper, play it earlier, and that can basically just win you the game. So it's definitely a good card. It's an expensive card, but it is a good card. Now the Demonic Frenzy is another kind of combo finisher for the deck in Chaos. But instead of it relying on your Warlord being the one to kind of attack again, this is like really trying to get most of that out of a unit, getting a unit really buffed up and then getting it to attack again. Really powerful card and a good way of ending the game. Traitor's Hate also for 2 energy, super powerful. Does 2 damage to all units. Obviously something like Storm Raven and Marines costs 4 energy, it does 2 damage to your opponent. This one can hurt yourself and that's why you're able to get it for 2. But often you'll take the 2 damage on yourself to kind of like do to a AoE to your opponent, and you can of course time when that's best to do as well. So overall it's a very powerful card and you probably see it in most Chaos decks. Dark Oratory, super powerful, combines really well with Spawndom, combines really well with pretty much anything. Like if you've got like 2 units or more, it's worth playing this to get kind of a Dark Pact. You can obviously use it to kind of make everything immune to not just hard remove, but any sort of like stratagems as well by giving them active resistance. Now the Hellbrute is also a very good card, and if you are going to go into the later game, then this is a 7-drop that you play. I mean, for 7 energy, having 7 health with 2 armor, that is very, very powerful. It makes it very hard to remove, and of course having 6/6 on the stats is really solid too. And its ability basically is that it fires off at 1 to 2 damage every time a Dark Pact goes off. So it has this sort of like machine gun secondary effect, which is really powerful. Orkz is this is like, I'm a bit torn on this card because sometimes I think it's a bad card, but the reality is that for 5 energy, it's got really solid stats, right? It's got the 6 health, 4/5 is not bad at all, and then having the bloodlust, like if this thing can attack, and kind of make it get another Dark Pact and then attack again, it's very powerful. One card that I really like is the Veteran Havoc. I said on the release I knew this card was going to be strong. Like anything that gives you an ability to kind of deal damage like that, to deal 4 damage in the turn you come with your Warlord attacking as well, that's potentially 6 damage to 1. That is a really good tempo card for helping you to kind of keep parity on board, so I really like that. And as is the Possessed Marine, right? Possessed Marine is a flanker for only 3 energy, it's giving you 4 melee attacks. Everything we said about Scarpet Destroyer and the Necrons, I'd say a similar thing for this type of card, but for even cheaper. It is a superb flanker. Again, big weakness is it doesn't help you against flyers, so you know, not great in the early game against things like Tau, for example, but outside of that, it's a superbly powerful, and you want to be running 2 of these. Plague Marine is also a good card because, to be honest, it has pretty good stats for its 3, and then it has a very, very potentially strong ability, right? That when a friendly troop dies, give again a Dark Pact of Resilience, so you can end up. I've seen this card have like 10 Dark Pacts of Resilience. It can be utterly insane. Okay, so kind of already touched a little bit on some of these. I think the Chosen's flexibility is just superb and makes this like the S tier of the 4-drops. I think the Helldrake Strike is even though it's random, which some people don't like, the 3 to 6 damage, it's a really high damage AoE, and it can really help take out stealth units. It can really help you win the game. It's like a nice closing out finisher. The Helldrake Strike is very good, and you can have 2 of them. Nagaran's champion you can only have 1 of, but it's an absolute value package. If you want to go back and watch my top 10 3-drops in the game video, I talked about Galaron's champion and why I think it's so good, but just its basic stats are fantastic, and then you start to look at the value that's built into this card. If your opponent lets you maximise that, it can be insane. Sword of Draconum's a card that really grew on me. I wasn't sure about it to start with, but especially once I started to realise like how it can enable an aggro deck, how it can be combined with Murderous Desires. Yeah, your Warlord can end up having, if he's got Draconum on and then you play something like Vengeance card, Legacy of Vengeance, yeah, giving you a bonus to your attack, and then you can swing twice with Murderous Desires. Very, very powerful. Spawndom, again, one of my favourite cards in Chaos. Everything I said about what I like about the flankers, the 1-drop spawns, well, this gives you as many as your opponent has opponents, and whether it's his Warlord or his unit. Hus Chaos is a really unique draw card because, unlike a lot of other faction draw cards, this is like has a very specific ability that works for Chaos, right? Because it's like If you draw troops with it, then you also get free Abaddon the Chosen. And the big thing with that is you don't really need to therefore play Abaddon the Chosen, but you are losing tempo when you play it, so the timing's got to be right. The Venom Crawler is definitely by far one of the best cards in the deck. I love having the Venom Crawler and then playing Host of Chaos, for example, for 2 energy, draws units, and then he draws an Abaddon's Chosen, that only costs 0 energy. Venom Crawler is superb. You can get the Black Crusade off 9E, for example. It's brilliant. And as is the Dark Apostle, another really powerful 6-drop. Any time you play a stratagem, it will trigger Artifice, which is give a Dark Pack to a friendly unit. Bringer of Decay is just superb. His stats are kind of like okay. They're not like world beating, but they're not bad. But his effect is very powerful, giving vulnerable to everything, including the Warlord, is superb. This is almost like a finisher. It can help you really burn your opponent down. Certainly makes it much easier to trade. You know, you imagine you drop this and you're playing against town. Now Abaddon can kill drones on its own because of the vulnerability. It's really powerful. Warp Talon's also really powerful. I know it's got 0 range attack, but having a whopping 6 melee attack makes this with stealth, makes this a beast, because you're always going to get the jump, basically. Zest Champion is the best flanker in the faction, right? It's like a 4-drop flanker, 5 melee attack, but when it strikes, it's going to gain a random Dark Pack, so hopefully it can heal itself, that kind of thing. And yeah, it's just a super powerful flanker, one of the best in the game. Now, the Veteran Legionary is a card that I think a lot of people sleep on. I think that this card is incredibly powerful. For 3 energy, the stats are supreme. It's 4 health, and where you've got things like the Praetorian Guard, for example, out with a 3-3, this guy's 3-4, so the stats on this thing don't get any better for a 3-drop. Unless it's a Noise Marine, and the Noise Marine has, you know, the Warlord, for example, has been hit multiple times, or just Noise Marine for some reason. And Noise Marine just runs away with the game. Last but not least, I've got Abaddon as an S tier. I do think that being able to heal himself too in the early game, and then being able to put Dark Packs on any of these units is powerful. And the 40 health really matters as well. So I've got Abaddon as the must-have Warlord. So there you go, guys. That is my Chaos or Black Legion full tier list. Let me know in the comments if there are any things that you think maybe I've got wrong or in the wrong tier, and let me know what you think. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one, guys.